In 5 months' time, when the 2020 election day is behind us, we think, we hope, we might look back on this week as a major turning point. Axios reports top Republicans say Trump's handling of the nation's civil unrest, particularly his controversial photo op, make them much more worried about his chances at re-election. Not to mention, Trump's spectacle at St. John's Church may have hurt him with a core pillar of his base. New York Times writes this, quote, the high marks that white evangelicals and white Catholics were giving the president earlier this year have slipped as the rallying effect that boosted him at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis has faded. That's just part of a larger erosion of support. Look at state polling from Fox News, no less. Trump down 9 points in Wisconsin, in a tie in Ohio, and Arizona down 4. But perhaps most notably in Texas, the state Trump won by 9 points in 16. The Quinnipiac poll shows the two candidates basically in a statistical tie. Let's bring in my friend, former colleague on the campaign trail and other places, Steve Schmidt. Steve, you're also playing a role, I think, in weakening this president's political standing with the Lincoln Project ads. Talk about the strategy behind what you guys are doing.
Well, Nicole, I think when you look at this race, it's an hour of choosing. There was a prospect put to the country 3 years ago by Donald Trump, which essentially said, hey, you don't like the direction the country's going, what could possibly go wrong, what could be worse, pick me. And so now we know that there is a real lack of imagination for tragedy in this country. So we sit in the middle of a pandemic where the United States is the epicenter because of President Trump's incompetent handling of it. 100,000 dead Americans, food lines, 40 million people unemployed, shattered economy, and now civil unrest that the president has incited throughout this process in violence towards constitutionally protected free speech and assembly by peaceful protesters, culminating with the direct order of the Attorney General of the United States, the clearing of Lafayette Square, including the gassing of a priest, so Donald Trump could go commit sacrilege and hold a Bible upside down. Just a remarkable, shattering week in the history of the country, where we see a malice, mean, incompetent president with no worry, no care, no concern, no fidelity to the exceptional qualities of the country, which are the freedoms we enjoy, the freedom of speech, to protest, to petition our government, to assemble in grievance.
Steve Schmidt, I heard you on Rachel Maddow last night talking about the incredibly high bar for military leaders to speak out. There were 3 more since you made those comments. Chairman Dempsey, Chairman Myers, and the third is escaping me. But we now have Admiral McCraven speaking out on Morning Joe. We also have General Kelly, a Marine before he was Donald Trump's chief of staff, co-signing Secretary Mattis's indictment of Donald Trump, where he basically compares his divisiveness to the Nazis' objectives of division. Talk about this moment for the U.S. military with Donald Trump as our country's commander-in-chief.
Well, the trigger point was the feeling of these retired officers, these retired 4-star officers, to defend the integrity of the institution, the armed forces of the United States, to defend their honor. The United States military is an apolitical institution. That's essential. The United States military serves the nation. It's not the private militia of Attorney General Barr, who's acting like he's the interior minister of some thugocracy. It's not the personal militia of the President of the United States. Military serves the nation. Its members swear an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And so Donald Trump has precipitated the greatest crisis in civil military relations in a very, very long time, maybe going all the way back to Truman and MacArthur, but it's much more serious now, because what Donald Trump has threatened to do is to turn the most lethal combat force in world history against the people it's dedicated to serve, breaking the bonds of affection between the American people and the military. And the military officers who are faithful and fidelitous to the Constitution want no part of that. I think they view it as an immoral order and a legal order. And I think they're deeply worried about the misuse and abuse of the military. Remember, people should have spoken out more when Donald Trump abused the military by sending them to the border for a photo op, pretending we were about to be invaded by a Panzer column that was a figment of his imagination. So this abuse of the military is being called out by the most senior leaders to protect one of the most important institutions in the country, and to remind everybody that the threat to liberty is not the protesters. The threat to liberty is the person who ordered the firing on the protesters, the person who ordered their gassing, the person who ordered that they be pepper sprayed. That's the threat to liberty in this country.
Steve Schmidt, it's never enough time with you. We're going to have to work on that. Find a way to spend more time talking about these things. Thank you so much, my friend. After the break, remembering lives well lived.